So again, Renee, what I would do, I would start with a welcoming statement. Then I would begin to talk about today's outcome. And that is, how are we going to design a family plan for the spiritual growth for your home? And so you want to walk them through that. You want to walk them through the agenda. And here are the agenda items. And then you want to go into that there's a process that we're going to follow today. We pray that that process is very interactive, that we're going to be in the process of developing a spiritual plan for their home that's unique to them. So we talk about it as a customized plan. We're going to say that, hey, we have useful tools that we've used and experienced with over 100,000 parents. So this process is proven, is tried, is true. Doesn't mean it can't be improved. Of course it can be improved. We'll improve it every day. But we think we have the core elements to make this a successful workshop. And then finally, as we equip and we want to encourage you, we want to affirm that the Lord has you in the place he has you to be. We're going to talk about every course or lesson in mainly 4 processes. And this is typically our process when we're teaching. 1, we're going to talk about the importance and impact of a life plan. We're going to talk about purpose. Most of it, everything we're going to start with purpose, the why. Then we're going to move into a section overview. Then we're going to have some couple working together or individuals or tables working together, but it's going to be some individual time. But then we're also going to come back as a group and we're going to share and have group experience and questions at the end. For each session, we'll go through this process together. Okay. So we're going to talk about it, talk about why and the purpose. We're going to talk about an overview. We're going to have some table time, and then we're going to have a community shared time. Okay. So we're going to walk through that process. We're going to, talk about, as I jump in, questions often change a life. And for our founder, Terrence Chapman, a question changed his life. And there's going to be many questions that's going to change your life as well. Like questions like, what must I do to be saved? I mean, in the Bible, that question came up quite a bit, and Jesus talked about that. And the question that really started this entire workshop process for Terrence, our founder, is his wife asked the question, are the children prepared to defend their faith at the high school? You see, his kids knew the Lord, but the difference is the question that really jolted him was, are they prepared to share their faith after high school, when he knew that 55 to 65% of students were walking away from the church shortly after they graduate from high school and get independence and go to college. They just walk away from the church and the faith. And
even so this more question, so these days too.
Yeah. And this question jarred him, right? It began, and then his wife came back and said, well, what are you going to do about it? And so, he began to take this intentional journey, and we want to encourage you. After 20 years of experience, we're going to share his experience with you today in this workshop, and why it's so critical to be intentional with a written spiritual plan for the spiritual development of your home. And then I'm going to talk about a vision. And this vision came from really a workshop training that he had. It's a Hyman Miller workshop at Coca-Cola that teaches how to write a written plan, a strategy, business plan in 45 minutes. It's a popular plan. In fact, this plan and this process that Terrence began to incorporate, Coca-Cola would write $45 billion plans or $1 billion plans in 45 minutes. But he had this vision of a blue gen generation. It's a strange, saying, what is this blue gen culture? Well, it's a blue sheet process. And with this blue sheet process, it walks through your values and your vision and mission and so many other things. And he saw a culture, a generation with a written spiritual plan to lead, guide, and direct their parenting pathways. And so he just imagined this blue gen culture. Today, less than 1% of Christians have a written spiritual development plan to lead, guide, and direct their path. And he was just imagining, what if we could turn that tide where we can see 99% of Christian homes with a written spiritual plan? Will the culture be transformed? Will things start to look different in our homes, in our communities, in our churches, and in our nation? He thinks so. In fact, he will go on to say that no nation can rise beyond their spiritual condition. And our spiritual condition today, I think we can all agree, is being challenged. And so I wanted to, as we go into this, here's a thought for you today. How can you be intentional about raising a generation of children that falls madly in love with what God has done? What would happen? I mean, we think what would happen is it'll be a strong love for Christ. But think about that question as we go through. How can we be intentional? What if we are intentional? What would be the outcome? What would be the impact? And so the importance of an impact of a family plan is really a lot of things. But one, think about your legacy of faith. Not only your children, but grandchildren. Think about future generations, as he says, for generations upon generations will come to know who I am and what I've done. And that our family will just keep expanding and inspiring into the future to know and to love him in a way that you can't even imagine. In fact, it's back to that saying, how do we help them fall madly in love with Christ Jesus? Well, why plan it all? I mean, why? I'm not a planner. I don't even like planning. Some of you love planning, but for those who say, man, why a plan? Well, here's why. 3 reasons. One, the greatest vision we could have is to worship, honor, and serve the living God and to be intentional in that process. Secondly, to do that, our prayers for God to create a love within us that's beyond measure. He had a plan. He had a plan from the very beginning that Christ would come and he would crush the head of the serpent. And therefore, there would no longer be enmity between us and him. But today, that enmity exists, but now we have Christ. And the relationship that we have in Christ, it goes beyond measure, his grace and his love and his mercy for us. Thirdly, we need to demonstrate the Christ-like behaviors. And there's a roadmap for these convictions to take place. And the way that we get to this roadmap, we make it simple, but we make it repetitive. Simple and repetitive. That's how your kids are going to grow. That's how your home is going to become more spiritually focused. We're not trying to develop disciples when they're 5 years old. We're looking to make disciples when they're 21 years old. And so we need to make things simple and repetitive. And so why plan? Well, here's why. There was a study by Harvard many years ago, and they studied MBA students. And they asked the question, and this is, by the way, from the book, Why Don't They Teach You? What don't they teach you at Harvard Business School by Mark McCormick? And in the study, in 1979 Harvard program, they asked students, have you set clear written goals for the future and made plans? 13% had goals, 84% had no specific goals at all. Well, they went back 10 years later and they looked up these members of the class that were interviewed again, and they found some things that was very interesting. One, the 13% who had goals were earning way more, twice as much more than the 84% who had no goals at all. Now, we're not, necessarily saying that because they had goals, there's a lot of factors in that, but the fact is they were being intentional, we believe. But here's the kicker. The 3% who had written goals were earning on average 10 times as much as the other 97% put together. So we think, writing things down, you get things done, and it makes a difference. So why set goals when it comes to the spiritual formation of your family? Well, like anybody, what should your plan look like? What it consists of? In my head, I've got a perfect plan. In fact, if I'm riding my bike across this high wire, it goes straight, it's parallel. I mean, it's beautiful towards the finish line. Well, that's an ideal world. It's not going to happen that way. And so the real world, kind of God's plan is that there's peaks, there's valleys, there's waters, there's all types of challenges in life. But yet, we're still going in the same direction towards the finish line, to finish well. And he's with us all throughout the process. And that's the key. How can we develop a plan that looks like the second one, the God's plan, with peaks and valleys and hills and turns and so forth, that's still leading in the same direction, pointing towards a God-honoring, Christ-centered, missional, and scope plan. But yet, God is in that midst and that journey with us.
Yeah. That visual reminds me of the ropes course that I do out here. People go to it and they think, oh, I get to do zip lines. Like, yeah, you do, but you got to go through all those things first, all those elements before you get to do the fun part.
Exactly. Right. And so that's where you see, you can interject your story, right?
Yeah.
And make that come live. So as you're going through this, you want to interject your story, not my story, right?
Right.
Make this your own. Okay.
And
then
real,
this next,
real quickly, I noticed a typo.
Okay.
There's needs to be an apostrophe between the DNS and God's plan, just so you know. Okay.
Yes, yes. And then I go into, our scripture verse, and we encourage to have a plan, considers Ephesians 6:4. Fathers, really speaking to parents, don't exasperate your children, but instead bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. So that is our verse for the ministry, NIV version, okay? And that's the verse we focus on. There's a lot of verses here in Deuteronomy and so many other places, but we've stuck here for a reason, okay? Because training and instruction is really family discipleship. All right. So what does this tailored plan look like? Because my plan is going to look different than your plan. Your family is different than my family. What if you're a single parent household? What if you're a traditional couple household? What if you're a grandparent raising children? The plan needs to be tailored to your family situation. And so this plan is designed regardless of what that scenario looks like. Whoever has authority in the home, there's 3 centers of focus, 3 main components. 1, that plan must be God-honoring. 2, Christ-centered, and missional in scope. In other words, when we talk about missional in scope, it's beyond you. It's moving the journey beyond yourself and your spiritual growth. That part of that growth is, how do you serve? How do you give yourself away? How do you begin to share the gospel? How do you begin to complete the Great Commission? That's when, and we'll talk about our 3-year process and how mission plays a role in our planning process. We'll talk about some key principles for you as a parent that comes from scripture. Beginning with Ephesians 6:4 is our starting point, but then moving through some training instructions, some warnings, etc. More scripture. Basically, everything we're going to talk to you about is based on a foundation of God's word. How do we know that, what's some signs of a healthy family? How do I know if my family's making progress, right? Well, we think 4 areas. What's your focus? What's your family's prayer life? What bonds you together in your structure? For example, focus. We must have the right mindset. We've got to start with the right tools. Our new plans and strategies, we have to be intentional in our approach. And we have to model the behavior. Our children are watching more of what we do, more so than what we say. In this position of posture of prayer, prayer becomes our lifeblood as a family. If you're a couple, how do you pray together? How are you praying with your children? As parents, you got to teach them intercessory prayer, how to pray for another person, just not themselves. And more importantly, how do they really pray for the will of God more so than what their Christmas list is, right? It's really bigger than that. His will be done. Prayerfully, how do we multiply this within our family, even extending to the outreach into our extended family? What does that look like? And how do we multiply this process to even something greater on mission? Bonds, we've got to talk about relationship, because everything we're doing is talking about, it starts with relationship. And we're talking about this deeper level of transparency and authenticity that is very difficult between parent and child. We've got to break down the walls and the barriers and become, as much as we can, and we have to be, intelligent and use wisdom and prayer as we think through that, but transparency and authenticity. And I would just add humility as we walk through this process. We have to think about accountability. Accountability to ourselves and one another. We have to be available. And we have to have what we're calling unity in the spirit is what bonds us. And so the structure is, whatever your family structure that's in place, whoever has authority in the home, you're the spiritual leader. If it's a traditional family of husband, wife, kids, or if it's a single parent or a grandparent raising kids, whoever has the authority in the home, define that family structure. We're going to do that today. We're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about the importance of family structure today. And we're going to talk about who has what authority and how to move forward. We're going to talk about prioritization and what we call non-negotiables. Consider them values that you possess. We're going to talk about how to be intentional in your planning process and the structure that we found to bring consistent results. At the end of the day, guys, it's a journey together, a journey of building relationships with one another, husband and wife, etc., or with your children. So that's the signs that we're looking for. Well, here's some things to think about. How would you describe your family today? How would you describe your marriage if you are married? How would you describe your children's spiritual maturity today? Let's take, again, remember what I said. We're not trying to make disciples when they're 5 years old. We're looking 20 years, 25 years down the road. And so what description would you like to have for your children 20 years from now? Can you imagine what that looks like? Can you envision that? Can you think of a picture, of a word picture to describe that? Well, today we're going to ask you to do that. In fact, we're going to ask you to do it right now. And we're going to talk about, here's the first introductory exercise. And notice, I'll pause for a minute. Notice I didn't go around the room, introduce yourself, blah, 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 because we're coming to that now. Okay. And now what they're going to do, they're going to sit around the table. They're going to take 10 minutes and they're going to introduce themselves to one another. And then they're also going to talk about, they're going to ask you a question. What description would you like to have for your children 20 years from now? And in some cases, I might even say, let's draw a word picture. Let's draw what this looks like. But sometimes I just have them write it down. It depends on the size of the class. So you can go anywhere you want to go with it. But there's an exercise right here to really deal with that first question and also introduce them to one another so they're not sitting around the table not knowing each other. And then at the end, you'll come back and you'll have you'll assign a spokesperson for each table. But in this exercise, they'll just stand up very quickly. Let's say it's a husband and wife, and maybe one of them will represent that family. And they will just share what they walked away with. This is our description. This is what we came up with. And then in general, as a table, this is kind of what we all kind of describe, right? So that's kind of how it will go. All right. So you'll have your little stopwatch. I use my phone and I put it on the minutes, whatever this exercise is. And at that 10 minutes or whatever, I click over, right? And we start back up. But I give them, warnings. You have 3 minutes left. You have 1 minute left. And then you move to the next section. Okay. And then, I come back and I bring them back together. Hey, what did you guys hear in this first session? What were some takeaways? And in what ways can you relate to what was shared? And then, people can stand up voluntarily and they can share, as they choose. Okay. So that's kind of the intro. All right. And then I'll go over in front of you, because at this point, I don't have them opening the books and going through looking at, right? They'll have a package there. And then I'll say, in front of you, here are the twos and the workbooks that we're going to be using throughout the day. And I'll go through the workbook, I'll do the family planning worksheet, and I'll show you how all that's set up. And by the end of the day, we're going to have a kind of a draft copy. It's not going to be your actual plan, but we want to get you started, kind of get your thoughts going. But the process is for you to return home in a posture of prayer, in the Lord's presence, and asking Him to lead, guide, and direct your path. This is not just an exercise of how much words can we put on a paper. This is seeking the very purpose from the Lord and His word and so forth. But we're going to get you started today with the tools that you're going to ultimately use to develop your written spiritual plan. And so you'll introduce the workbook, you'll introduce the planning worksheet, which I'm going to send you, and then they'll start the process. Okay.
Okay.
Make sure they have pens and papers and so forth. At this point, you basically go to this page and then you go to your participant guide.
Okay.
Okay. So you've kind of set it up the way you want to set it up. I basically have walked you through the first 5-6 pages of the workbook. And now I'm on the page in my book, it says page 8.
Okay.
Ministry story, are you equipped?
Okay.
You should be there. Okay. And you just start to set up genealogy. And this is how I set it up. I go and I talk about, one of the things I realize as a parent is that I can't go back and change the beginning, but I can start where I am and change the ending. That quote from C.S. Lewis energized me because most parents, we may feel shame, blame, or guilt, or we may feel good about what we've done so far as a parent. And some of you in the room may not even be parents yet, and you might be thinking, hey, how can I parent well when I do have children? Or some of you may have raised children and now have grandchildren. And you're thinking about, man, I didn't do all that I could do or should have done. About. Don't worry about that. The beauty is we're going to start where we are and we can change the ending of our story. And we can also emphasize the great past, right? And so the ministry story, remember, are you equipped? Are you equipped to really start this journey? Do you feel comfortable? Do you feel, remember, 68% of Christian parents felt ill-equipped to raise their children in the Lord.
Is that your doorbell?
No, I think that must be yours.
Real quick.
Okay.
Sorry.
You'll see the PowerPoint at this time.
Yeah.
So I won't go through all this, but you'll kind of get the flow once I see it, right? So now I'm into the workbook, the participant book, and I'm setting things up. And then you'll see a section around ministry story, are you equipped? And I will repeat this blue gen culture. We need a new generation of parents who are equipped and responsible to disciple in the will of God and the wisdom of God. Well, when I look at my ministry story, I asked the question, am I equipped to do this? And there was 4 or 5 key questions that I began to think about. One is, where's my family in its spiritual pilgrimage? Where are we today, right? And I asked myself the question, how are my parenting disciplines drawing the family closer to God? And so I started to go through those questions, basically, that's in your ministry story, those 4 or 5 questions, okay?
Okay.
And then I'll set it up this way, but I make it personal, right? To what extent do you live out the confession that Christ is Lord? How am I living this out at home? What specific ways have you taken on the battle for the souls of lost people? And finally, I asked the question, the value of any plan is determined by the purpose it fulfills. What value, what purpose am I looking for this plan to fulfill? And I walked away saying, man, what difference does it make? What if I don't plan? What if I don't even do any of this stuff? Well, it reminded me, and I started to go through the story. What is the return? And you'll have that story in your book. And I talk about the apostle Paul and so forth, and the jailer. And, I go through different things. I go through people he disciples. So whatever you want to go there is where you go to this page. Okay. And then I go into genealogy and I talk about this whole idea of a link to a spiritual heritage. And I tell them my story. You can go anywhere you want, but I just walk through the importance of genealogy and why I tell the story. For me, I talk about my Aunt Virgie. You can go back to the video on the Academy website. It'll tell you that story and share that story, or you can share your story. Make it personal, make it your own. But as you're going through genealogy, you want to set it up and take them to an exercise. And that exercise is to begin to first complete their genealogy information for their home, for their parents. So you'll start with that. They'll have a worksheet as well. And they can, and we don't want them to fill it all out. We just want them to pencil in some sample. For example, some of the genealogy information is their family's history. So they would write, they would fill in the box who their parents are, grandparents, if they know their great grandparents, etc. And then they would just write down what city of birth, what whatever they can fill out. We're not looking to do a lot of it because they're going to have to go home, probably do some research, but begin to ask questions. But just some of the base, they should know. Some may not, but the parents and so forth, grandparents, probably as far back, some people can go to great grandparents. But we just want to give them a general feel. But here are the most important things we want to talk about in genealogy. It's those key thoughts. Everything you want to get to the key thoughts, the key thoughts, the key thoughts. Whatever story you want to tell, it's up to you. But the key thoughts is what? You see at the end, those key thoughts, what are they?
That your ancestry has influenced your spiritual life.
Exactly.
All generations will know and remember. God blesses the generations who seek him.
Yep.
Like Abraham, and then the first generation and legacy.
So your story that you want to set up and use there, I have a story I use around my Aunt Virgie. You might want to have a different story, whatever. But lead it up at the end to really talk to these key thoughts. Okay. Share those key thoughts with them. And then you're going to go to the next session. Okay. And that next session is their story, their personal testimony. It's the most significant story ever told. What must I do to be saved? Remember that question that I posed at the end that many talked about? Well, what must one be? What disciplines must I put in place, right? So that they are inquisitive and inquiring and investigating this very same question. Right?
Okay, I have a question about that. I have a theological question about that.
Yes.
So, there's nothing we do to be saved.
Exactly. That's exactly my point.
Okay.
That's why I said, what must we do to be saved? What you're going to bring them to is a freeing for them. And here's the freeing. The freeing is there's nothing we can do to earn his favor. There's nothing we're not the ones to redeem our children, but many parents put pressure on themselves to think, if I have to save my child, I have to do something to save my child.
Right.
That's not your goal. Your job, your responsibility, if you will, is to be the spiritual leader of your home. Your responsibility is to train and instruct him about who he is and what he's done. You don't have the power of transformation.
Right.
But you do have the responsibility and honor to share with them, to train and instruct them who is. And so what you want to do in your planning process is to bring them to such curiosity that they will begin to investigate this very question themselves. Okay, so everything we're pointing to is an investigation, so they can find the answers through the word of the Bible. And that becomes their foundation for answering this very question. What must I do to be saved? And so that's a perfect point. But what you can do is share your story, share your journey. And we teach that story in 3 ways: your life before Christ, how did you come to Christ, and your life after Christ.
But we're not at that point yet, right?
Right. Well, we're on the personal testimony right now.
Okay, gotcha.
So now I'm skipping some things because now remember they took some time to kind of working through genealogy. Now you're coming back and you don't want to go through that anymore. You want to go right into personal testimony. Most important story, because basically what they're capturing in this genealogy are stories of their ancestors. Now that's what Renee was talking about. And now they're coming to tell their story. Okay. In fact, my proposal will be when you sit down with your children for the very first time Don't talk to them about some elaborate planning process and everything else. Just tell your story. Tell your
Mhm.
story of faith. Tell them about the journey that you've been on and why you've been on that journey and what that journey means to you and so forth. And so when you tell your personal story, here's some key things. Everyone has a unique story to share about his or her spiritual journey. Number one. Number two, each story has a golden thread of redemption. Who? Through Christ. Number three, without the cross, there could be no testimony. So I
Where are you
have to,
seeing that information? Sorry, real
personal
quickly.
testimony, key thoughts.
Um,
It's on my page 15.
oh, okay.
Yep.
Next page. Okay,
So
gotcha.
I'm just kind of setting it up, right?
Right.
And you can choose where you go in here. Remember, I told my story. I'm skipping something because of time, but I'm
Mhm.
telling my story. I'll tell the story of the Philippian jailer that you'll see on your page 14. So I'm telling that story. I'm telling, what happened there. As you know, the story of the Philippian jailer, Paul and Silas has been persecuted. They've been placed in jail in Philippi. The jailer has responsibility, blah, blah, blah. Paul, Silas, earthquake, they could have
Right.
escaped. They chose not to, da, da, da. The jailer is responsible for the prisoner. If the prisoner escapes, the jailer's life is at stake. Paul, Silas says, hey, don't panic. We're all here. We didn't go anywhere. They shared the gospel with the jailer, and the jailer immediately went home and shared his story, and family was saved, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So then
Gotcha.
I go through these things. In the story of the jailer, there were 7 things. One, we saw the power of prayer and praise.
Okay.
Okay. The
So what?
power
Go ahead.
of prayer and praise. Secondly, and this is going to be a nice little thing, you can have fun with this. Secondly, we saw the power of God is demonstrated.
Mhm.
Third, we saw the power of a question, like this question: what must I do to be saved? Well, guess what we saw in number 4? We saw the what?
The response, the power of the
The
response,
power of response. Well, let's see what we saw in question 5. We saw the what? Of a testimony.
the power of a
The
testimony,
power of a testimony. And who can guess what we saw at the end?
the power of faith.
The power of faith. So let me tell you my story, right? And then you can go into your story, wherever you want to go, and just talk about your life before Christ. How did you come to Christ? And your life after Christ. And it shouldn't be an hour story. It should be no more than a 3 to 5 minute time take, because you want to teach them how to also share their story in a short period of time. Okay.
Mhm. Okay.
And then the next page, which on my sheet in my book is 15,
Mhm.
they briefly can look at, this is not an exercise they're going to do right now, but they can look at, there's a generational spiritual development plan for their family. So they're the husband or mother or father, whatever, the children, they can list those down and they can begin to fill out what church do they participate. But basically you're advising, take this home, begin to complete this, and this is going to be part of your worksheet, part of your blue sheet process. Okay. Then you start to cover your key thoughts, is where I was going before. And you cover those key thoughts around testimony. Okay. And that's where you begin to talk about those 6 key thoughts. Okay. To sum up the session.
Right.
Okay. And then there's the next thing that you'll see is in your book on page 16 is a personal testimony exercise. Remember that? That's their story.
Right.
And you want to encourage them when they return home to write out their story, not to do it there, but to write out their story, asking these 3 questions. How did I live and think before I met Christ? What events led me in my experience of meeting him? And how has my life changed since I met him? That's
Okay.
their story. Okay. They're to go back, pray about it, write it down, be, as they prepare to share their personal testimony. with their
Okay.
children. Okay. So that's their exercise. Not there. It sets it up, gives them a charge to go do it. And we'll tell you in the time frame and all that stuff later. Okay.
Okay.
And then you turn to the next page, 17, that's when it'll just recap what I just talked about, the most important question, and so forth and so on. So I'm tying all those things together, and that's how I did it. Okay.
Okay.
And then I go on to values. I changed my PowerPoint slide to values. Well, in this session, guys, we're going to talk about values. What do we really believe and hold as non-negotiables? There are some values that we might consider urgent, some we might consider important, and some we may not have discovered yet. We might have values that we just haven't discovered yet. And then there's some things that, you know what, we probably should value, but we don't. Okay. And so I want to get into this discussion of values. And during this process, I may ask questions. Guys, what's your definition of values? You know, I might get a couple of people to give me some feedback. It depends on how talkative. I want them talkative. I want them responsive and that type of thing. But I want it quick, right? I want a few people to come and say, hey, well, this is what I think a value is, and so forth and so forth and so forth. Okay. And just get some feedback. And then I go into my section on values. What do you believe? What do you really believe? And I start to go through a discussion there. You can kind of look at the book and see some things and some examples. And then I go into, after I kind of set up this process, I go into a values exercise. Okay. And in my value exercise, I say, I want you to answer a question. What's most important to you? What's most important to your family? And before you go into this exercise, I want you to be thinking about it. Lord, I want you to think through values now with me. In everything we do, we want to invite the Lord to be in our presence. And he says, when two or more are gathered, he's there, but he's with us always, even until the end of the day. So I want you to know that when you're planning, you're not planning alone. You're always planning with him and the Holy Spirit within you that's moving in such a way. So invite him into the conversation, invite him into the process, right? So Lord, I want to think through values now. I want to think through, what do you want my family to live for consistently? In other words, see, we don't want your best for your family. We want his best for your family. And that's the mind. Remember I talked about the mindset has to be changed, has to be altered. It's not about what you want. It's about what he wants for you. So I want to talk to the Lord. I'm inviting you in. Pare down just a few values for me. I probably have 15, 20 values, but there's only a few that are non-negotiable. And I want to identify those values today. And then I want to, Lord, I'm inviting you in because I want to try to write these values down, but not only values, but I want to write down my beliefs for that value. Because I may have a value. Let's just say I value education. But I have a belief behind that to say why I value education. And I want to begin to really understand why I value it so much. And so, summary, I want you to pray for it. Once you kind of work through this and start to identify these values, I want you to pray for them daily with your family. These are things. So you're just not, throwing out some air prayers all the time, but you're very focused in your prayer life now. And so you want to be praying for these values constantly. Remember, simple and repetitive. Simple and repetitive.
And this exercise they do in the session?
Yeah, well, I'm gonna show you, and then the exercise is gonna be really quick at the end. So I'm setting this up, right? What do you want? Da da da. And then at the end, we give them a chance to write down maybe two or three of their values.
Yeah, okay. So they do that there, not
they
at
do
home.
that there, right?
Right, okay.
And then we move to the next slide. And we say, hey, let's talk about some of these values. Well, before I go here, I may bring them back together. Hey, let's talk about some values you identified, and why. People get up and they'll share, boom, 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 one per table or whatever, right? Depends on how much time, you have. And then I'll go and I'll wrap this session up and I'll talk about the value. So, we talked about what do you want your family to live for consistently, some values that I kind of walk through and most people come through. This typical is faith and, we value faith and peace and worship or whatever, right? And so pray for these values and I'll wrap it up and regular review and devotional time. And so I'll kind of wrap up this session, right? And then I maybe take a break at this point.
Okay.
It's in the schedule. It depends how it's flowing. It depends how much energy I've got. But I typically take a break right before this, a short 10-minute, 15-minute break. Let them get some refreshments, water, coffee, whatever. And now when I come back, sometime I'll play a video that I'll send you. It's our Victoria's Family video. It's a short 32-second video just to kind of bring people back together, and let them know we're about to start. All right. And then I jump into vision and I go into, it's page 20 in your book. I start to set it up, what is on the horizon? What is vision? And I start to walk through that. I'm not going to do all of that here, but you can do that on your own. You can walk through. And then at the end, I'll tell a story with everything I do. And then I'll lead into this exercise. Okay. These are some key points I'll make during this session. Hey, what are you trying to accomplish? But more importantly, what are you trusting God for? What is your family trusting God for? What are you trusting God for? And there's 3 suggestions in developing your family's vision statement. Here are some things. 1, write down your role in the family. What is your role in the family? What is your role as a husband, as a wife, as a grandparent, or whatever you are? What is your role as a parent? It may be a loving aunt, it may be a loving uncle, but what is your role in the family that you're adopting here? Secondly, I want you to get away. I want you to take some time to read and to think and to pray. And number 3, I want you to seek words that describe your roles and your vision as you're going through this devotional process alone. And you start that with prayer. And I keep emphasizing prayer. Prayer. God, I'm in your presence now. Give me some time to think about my family and what you would have my family to become. Remember, we don't want your best. We want his best for your family. And then I start to set up the exercise. I'll give them some examples. I'm very cautious here because I don't want people repeating, trying to say same old Christian words, but I want to give them some examples. One is spiritual planning, Christ-centered, disciples for Christ. That's my goal down the road. I want them to see mature and equipped disciples for Christ. So here's just a vision statement we walked away with. He said, as every Christ-centered family would have a written spiritual plan to use as a tool, right? But I want my children to live that same purpose, right? But everything is Christ-centered. It's all about him. It's all for him, for his glory, right? So I may just throw out some vision statements, some samples. Here's a vision statement. Here's a vision. But I don't want to stay too long here because I don't want them to come up with a repetitive vision statement that looks like this. I want their vision statement to be unique.
Right.
Okay. And then I'll lead to the exercise. Hey, based on the words that came to mind, if we talked in quiet time and so forth, so, how would you describe your family 20 years from today? Write it down. What would be a 10, 15 word vision statement?
And
that
this
would
is
yeah, and they take the time is on your sheet. It could be 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever. It depends on how much time you have as you set it up. Okay.
Which sheet?
It'll be the one I sent you. Yeah.
Okay.
And so you have to fill this out based on how your progression is going, how the mode is going. Typically, I'll give about 15, 20 minutes.
Okay.
They pray through, they write, they kind of get started on a draft. And then you bring them back together and you say, hey, who would like to share, their vision statement? And you get a few of those in the room, right? You
Mm-hmm.
capture some key words from those statements that they share, right? And the key to this is that their vision statement, they should keep in mind the values that they put on the page.
Mm-hmm.
And how does the vision statement help them to live out those non-negotiable values? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Then you'll wrap up the session and you'll try to give them some examples, right? You know, if you want to kind of give them a precursor, you know, when you go back, think about these things. It's a mental image you have 20 years from now today. But everything, think about your vision statement being a Christ-centered statement, integrity-focused statement, one that you can live out, one that you believe in, action-oriented statement, generational legacy-driven statement. And then combine these sentences as you just write out. So one example I use is you can write out a sentence for each A, B, and C, and then D, and then combine them into one statement. But then I take them through, how do we get this down to 10, 15 words no more?
Mm-hmm.
The shorter, the better, because you want to be able to remember the statement, right? You don't want to write a book. You just want to remember something short, simple, sweet.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have a time of, we move on to the next session of mission. Mission talking about how do you accomplish the vision? You have your values kind of identified. Your vision is starting to take shape. Now, how do we move forward? How do we get there, right? Imagine if I was traveling to Chicago from Atlanta. Theoretically, I would take the highway. I would map it out and I would have stopping points, right? It's an 8-hour drive and I would stop. I would have, stopping points. I call them mile markers. But I would have kind of a process. Well, do I use a GPS system? Do I use an old atlas? Do I use, what do I use, right? How do I map out? How do I get there? I know I want to get to Chicago. That's my vision.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a process in how I get there and the tools I'm going to use to get there. How I'm going to get there. Am I going to drive? Am I going to fly? Am I going to, take a train? Well, your mission is going to really speak to how you accomplish your vision.
Mm-hmm.
But God has already given you that mission. He's giving you those that transportation highway, if you will, in these 66 books, in his basic instructions before leaving this earth, called the Bible. He's already spoken. He's already told us. He's already told us the pathway. We've got to find now, we got to embrace his pathway for our journey. And so I'll go through, how we're going to get there, and I'll start to set it up. You'll see that on page 22, and I'll speak to that a little bit. And then I'll speak to, set up, in the last session, I heard a vision statement, I might pull some out from there, or here's a sample of a vision statement. I might pull some out from here. And then I'll talk about, the Lord's word and how he speaks to vision. So I'll start to share Proverbs 3:1-4, what he's talking about. I might share around mission, Proverbs 3:5-12. So now I'm walking them through an exercise, or I'm walking them through a session using God's word around mission and how to develop a mission statement using God's word, not my word, but his word. Remember, I said the Bible is his basic instructions. It's his roadmap. Right. It's his GPS. So I'm using his GPS system, not mine. Okay. And then I go through, some examples of that, right? I go through some more examples of his word speaking to it. And then I give him, what is the mission? What do you need to happen in this vision statement that you're trying to get through? What you're trying to accomplish, and so forth. And then I go through a sample. So just kind of give them a feel for what one may look like. I don't want them to come up with the same one or anything close, but I do want to give them a little sample, right? And then I talk about these elements of a mission statement. I walk through that. And here's 4 elements. And then I ask them to write a sentence. And then I give them, 15 minutes to write down their mission statement. So remember, everything, I'm kind of defining it. I'm illustrating. I'm giving them some examples. And then the process is, okay, now you write it down. And then at the end, I give them some key thoughts.
Okay, so there is an exercise during the class for the mission statement, but I don't see it in the participants guide. Unless it's that, what will guide your family's spiritual growth? Is that what that's supposed to be?
Are you in the mission session, page 22?
I'm on page 22,
And it
where it
talks about,
describes.
yeah.
But is there an exercise?
Yeah, there it is right there. Yeah, it's on
That
page
is the
23. Yeah,
Oh, wait, so
23.
page 23, that,
23. Yeah,
that's the mission statement exercise?
combining their values, their vision, and their mission together.
But they got to write the mission statement first.
Exactly.
Before they can do that. Okay.
Exactly.
So,
And that's where your PowerPoint, you're using your PowerPoint to walk them through that. The exercise then will be when they go home, remember, you're not trying to do everything there. You're trying to give them pieces and tools. So when they return home, the direction is to fill out this form on page 23.
But there is an in-class exercise for them to write their mission statement.
Yes. And that's
okay. It was a little confusing just because like there is one for vision exercise in the
participant. Oh yeah, I see. Yeah.
Not one.
Yeah. Because here we're combining all three together, the values, vision, and mission together. And they will do that at home as part of their blue sheet process. So and then you're going to give them some key thoughts on page 24.
Okay, page 23, they do at home.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so you give them 15 minutes to write out their mission. That's what you do in class. And they start to write it out. And then you're going to tell them what they're going to be doing when they return home. Remember, what they're doing in class is just really kind of giving them an experience. What we want them to do when they return home is really pray through this process together and then write it out and fill out these sheets. We're not trying to say you have to write your mission statement in 15 minutes and then transfer into a form. That's not what I want. I want them to just experience the process so that when they do return home, they can be in a posture of prayer. They can really be reading God's word. And then they can take their time and write out their vision and mission statement, et cetera, together.
To flesh it out, yeah.
Exactly, okay? So I'm just setting it up, kind of the process. And then the key thoughts I'll wrap up at the end, which is on page 24. After they complete these, they'll come back, they'll share a little bit about their mission statement, their experience, what they found, and so forth and so on. And then I'll give them some key thoughts on page 24. And I'll share things, as you can see, vision, spiritual vision, I'll walk them through mission, I'll walk them through values and how they need to transfer once they complete it to this page on page 23.
Okay.
And then I typically, it's typically time for lunch. So I take an hour lunch. I don't go over anything at lunch. We just eat and we have fellowship.
Okay.
And I basically give them an exercise to find another person that's in the workshop that's not at your table, and your assignment is to find out one thing about them from a person you don't know. It's to meet a person you don't know, find out their name, and find out one thing about them that interests you or whatever, right? And so during lunch, I just want them to meet other people and fellowship. Okay, so that's just what I do. You can do anything during lunch.
Okay.
Okay, but I want them to begin to, just talk to each other and all that good stuff, not sit in a corner somewhere.
Right.
So then we return from lunch, right? I'll play the video again, 32 seconds, right? Let them know, hey, it's time to come back, or you can use chimes or whatever you want to do. I just use the video.
Okay.
And then I bring them back and I say, okay, guys, I do a quick, hey, we've talked about why we're here, the vision, the values, the vision, the mission. Notice that I put values before I put vision and mission, because you have to understand your non-negotiables before you write out your vision and your mission. But remember I told you about that trip to Chicago and I talked about mile markers? Well, today I want to talk to you about spiritual markers. And now I want to talk to you about goals. These are milestones that measures your progress, right? And then I start to set that up, and I start to go into 3 types of milestones. First one is on page 26, connection goals. And I start to set up connection goals. And then I move into, I give them examples, I walk through, and then I talk about commitment goals. Walk through that,
There
give examples.
slides on those too?
Hmm?
Are there slides for that too?
Yeah. And so I'm walking through, I may walk through spiritual, what R.C. Sproul. I may walk through goals, I'm setting all this up. What is a goal? Samples of spiritual markers. I'll walk through all that. And I'm walking through these things. I'm making them personal. I'm making it my own. If I was doing this in a workshop, I'll say something like this. The first mile marker is called connect goals. And these goals are really, we're going to be talking about our communion with Christ, but we're going to be talking about what we believe. What's the tenets of our faith? What's the non-negotiable? What are the essentials? Yes, but when I look at these mile markers, these connection goals, I want my kids to know who God is. Who am I as man? What about the fall that they should know? Who is Christ? I want to talk about purpose. And so when I look at these connection goals, it's really talking about, what do I believe and why do I believe them? And then I'll set up some things and I'll tell a story. I'll go through some different things. Then when I go through commitment goals, in the first year, we talked about connection goals. But in the second year, we're going to be talking about commitment goals. How do I live out these things that I say I believe? If I talk about this life of love, how do I live it out? And so there's a commitment that I'm making to these goals, to these mile markers. How do I know if I'm reaching it? And I'll start to walk through that. How are my family embracing Christ's love? What goals would best promote my family's spiritual development? I start to look and search for those type of answers. And then year 3, the goals set around commission goals. When I talk about commission goals, I'm talking about, how do we reach the lost? How do my family begin to do mission together? How do I teach them how to share God's word and the good news? Less than 3% of Christians today know how to share their faith. But so how are you going to teach your children and how to share the faith? How are you going to teach them how you're going to even share your faith with your children based on their age group and so forth?
So I need to make, sorry.
Yeah, so you make it personal, right?
But I need to make it clear to them that milestone, like connect goals, is the first year.
Yes.
Because I know it says it like in that further back, page 30, it shows it's broken down by years, but it's not.
Yeah, and I'm going to set that up at the end. So after I kind of explain it to them, and then I'm going to talk about the exact same thing. Year 1, we're focused on connection goals. Okay. The entire year. No more than 3 goals per year. Because I do a whole thing. If you do more than 3 goals, they don't get done. The study, if you did 10 goals, right. 80% of the time, you're not going to get anything done. So I set all that up, and you can make it personal, make it your own. But I set that up, and I talk about 1 goal per year, 1 theme per year, connection year, commitment year, commission year. And then after year 3, you go back to year 1. You go back to connection again. And you go back to commitment and so forth. And I'll tell the story. We've been doing this for 20 years with my family. We're on the 7th time around. That's each year.
3-year cycle.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay, so you make it your own. And then you'll set it up. The exercise, you'll begin to set that up. How are you going to accomplish these things? What are your milestones? What's some things you need to write down? What are you going to do? Right? And so
now, this exercise is done at home, or?
No, you can do 3 of those. You can give, I sometimes, depending on time, I'll say, hey, for today, we're going to write down 1 goal, just for exercise sake, in each section. So write a connection goal, write a commitment goal, and write a commission goal. Okay. And then write out an individual goal for yourself, because transformation begins in you. And so, just take a moment, let's see this thing start flushing. So I'll start to set up the exercises on page 29 and 30. Okay.
Okay.
And then I'll have a table. I'll bring them back and we'll have a table. I'll encourage them to have a table discussion. How do you see the idea of training and instructing of the Lord? And how will this affect your thoughts of parenting? I just want to kind of get a kind of where they are and get some discussion going. What goals did you have? Share if who would like to share any of those, and we'll talk about them, right? And what makes that a connection goal? What makes that a commitment goal? What makes that a commission goal? Da da da. And we'll just move, we'll go through that and have some discussion. Okay. Then we'll come back. And after I'm done with goals, I'll share key thoughts. Thank you guys for sharing. It was enlightening, whatever. Now, let me share you some key thoughts. And that's when I go into a little bit more specifics around these 3 goals. Okay.
Okay.
Then I'll move into life, age, and stage planning. Guys, we just finished talking about milestones and goals, but your family may look a lot different than mine. So how do we train a 5-year-old different than a 16-year-old? And then how do we not only age-based, but certain children may be in a different place in terms of their spiritual maturity. They may be a very young person in age, but they may be very mature in their spiritual development. So how do we look at age and stage life planning? How do we train a 5-year-old? What should we be talking about from 0 to 5? What should we be talking about from 6 to, whatever? And then in the next chart, we'll start to walk them through that. Okay. Page 33, page 34. And so I started to kind of set this up. I started talking about some key things I want to emphasize. And I talk about when you're looking at age and stage planning for your children, when do you start? When do I start? How early should they be? Before they're born. We should start singing and worshiping and doing all these things before they're even born, right? And you got this slide up, and but when their age is 0 to 5, what are the things you want to talk about? You want to talk about God's love. You want to talk about, and you could say, man, hey, who loves you? Just answer a simple question. Who loves you? Grandpa loves me. Grandma loves me. Well, who else? Mom loves me. Dad loves me. My brother loves me. Anybody else? And what you want to teach them is that God loves them. That's a simple exercise that you can teach a 1 or 2-year-old, right? You can read to them. You can do all those things that you normally would do in an educational setting to teach them their ABCs. You're teaching them the ABCs of your faith. And so think about it. There's plenty of books and resources and things of that nature that can help you in your church, in our library of resources we have at Victoria's Family, et cetera, right? And so I just walk them through different things that they can do in these different age groups and some resources that they can turn to. Some of those research sources of ours, some of those resources of someone else, but we have set up, which I'll set up when I come. I have kind of an inventory table, a book table, a reference table, things that I found to be useful, in addition to our library resources on YouTube and so forth and so on. We have a 7-day devotional. We have a 7-day prayer guide. That's when I'm introducing all of those extra materials that, hey, we're developing these things all the time. They're free for you, Here in your sample package, you have a 7-day devotional. You have a 7-day prayer guide to get started. You have da-da-da-da-da. So those are things I want to be emphasizing. And then at the end, I want to go through these key thoughts. Okay. And that will be that section. The next section, these last 3 really goes fast, so it gives you time to kind of catch up, but they're really important. This next session, I want to talk about adopting a family member. Depending on your timing, I may take a break after this session. So I go to adopt a family member. And here I'm talking about the spiritual development of your family does not end with your nuclear family. It ends with developing mature followers of Christ who are motivated and equipped to serve other spiritual, emotional, and physical needs. And so what about your extended family? What about, your uncles or your, cousins or whatever? Specifically here, we're talking about praying for a family member who don't know Christ. Not one that you don't think they're spiritually mature enough or blah, blah, blah. But this person clearly does not demonstrate the relationship with Christ. You're not going to be sharing the gospel with them. You're not going to do anything. What you're going to do here is identify that person, if age appropriate, with your children. And for the entire year, you're going to pray for that individual. You're also, depending on your comfort level, you're going to invite them into some of your family activities and traditions. You may want to help them with a very specific need or opportunity that they have. The Lord often fed them before he shared the gospel with them. You're going to offer to pray with them and for them about the needs that can't be met or they don't understand how they can meet those needs. You want to pray for them as a family together. And you want to be genuine about your struggles with them. And you want to, say, hey, this is how Christ helped you through these struggles. And then you want to, possibly invite them to church or invite them over your house or just talk about it. Now, here's what I did. My first year, I decided that I would invite my uncle into the experience. And I called him up, and Uncle AC, I just want to let you know that my family is going through a spiritual development process and writing some things down. And we have a section in there that we adopt a family member. And, we decided to adopt you. And specifically what that means is we want to pray for you for the entire year. But before I get started, I want to help my family members understand how we can be praying for you. Number one, I want to ask for permission. Can we pray for you? Although we're going to pray for you anyway. But I want to ask for, how can we be praying for you specifically? What challenges are you facing? What joys do you have? What's keeping you up at night? Whatever. I get to know him. I'm writing down stuff. It's what I did with my uncle. I just said, hey, tell me about your life. He's one of my favorite uncles. Can you tell me, just tell me your story? Tell me about your childhood. Tell me about, just your life, what you did, challenges, I mean, whatever I feel comfortable with the family member. And then I was just writing things down. I was capturing it. Believe me, I learned more information about my uncle than I probably did in 10 minutes than I did in 30 years.
Wow.
And then I just started to write it down. So when I went back as the spiritual leader, the plan, I shared with my family, specifically, this is Uncle, AC. This is his life. This is his life, because I want them to know him. Mm-hmm. This is his life. This is his experience. This is what he's asked us specifically to pray about. And this is if my kids are age appropriate, right? If they're younger,
right,
then I'm going to be praying differently, right? But I'm laying out very specifically how we can be praying for AC, right? Or the family member. And so on page 37, I capture information on AC. His name, his date of birth, his address, his marital status, whatever, his kids, needs, ministry goals, whatever whatever I want to write down in there, I'm capturing. So I have a sheet on AC on my family member. And then I make this key thoughts. I share these key thoughts with them. You see it on page 37. What are some of those key thoughts?
Teach your children about intercessory prayer. Pray for a family member who doesn't know Christ. Offer the prayer, I guess it means in faith and love. The prayers of the righteous are powerful and effective.
Mm-hmm. And then that's when I'll repeat, we must embark on a new course to raise our children in the Lord. And that one course is we have to teach our children that it's not all about them. It's bigger than them. And so here we're demonstrating Christ-like love by reaching out and adopting a family member and just praying, which is when you think about disciplines, prayer is our lifeblood. Because you see, I keep touching on those, like, how do we know if we're making progress, illustration that I went over at the very beginning. I'm just touching on different points, but that's just me. I mean, you can take it wherever you want as long as you go through these key thoughts. Okay.
Right. Okay.
And then I
Gotcha.
wrap it up, and I may take a break. I may jump right in. Depends on timing with how it's going. I go into family covenant. Well, what is a family covenant? And I might ask that question, and I'll ask you, well, Lori, what is a family covenant? And then they'll give, some answers around the room, and I'll capture some keywords on the board or whatever. Depends on your style.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll go in and I'll explain. This is what a family covenant is. It's a solemn promise, and da 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 da. Start to go through that page on page 38, and I'll set that up, and I'll go through an exercise. Now, what I like to do, well, a lot of times I like to ask, well, what did you hear? And they will share whatever they heard, and then I'll walk them through an exercise. I want you to write out a biblically based promise statement, and I walk them through that. And then I talk about, we see covenants that God has made from the very beginning, that he would send his son, and da 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 da. So I'll set it up whatever way you want to wrap it up. And then I will, just kind of walk them through it, right? So I'm on this right here. I have this slide up, and then I kind of walk them through the exercise, write out a biblically based covenant statement that you will commit yourself to.
And this is one they do in class or at home?
Yeah, they can do it at home, or you can, do it verbally, or they can take a few minutes to write it out. It depends on the time that you have.
Okay.
But it's not critical, but it's just, hey, when you return home, you can write out the statement, or hey, we got a little time here, let's write out a statement. Everything is kind of, you got to judge it based on time and process, right? But this is an assignment that they have when they return home and start to write out their plan, okay? But you want to talk about it enough that they get it, right? And then on page 36 is where they will place that as whatever they wrote out.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I will share a little bit about our covenant with my family. Is typically when I'm training, I'll say, here's some commitments that we made to one another. And that story is on the Academy website. And I'll talk about, being the spiritual leader I am. I was traveling, I was busy. We were thinking about doing this in my family. I was thinking, hey, let's meet once a month and let's have our devotional. My kids challenged me and said, hey, what about once a week? We settled on every 2 weeks, and we've been doing that for 20 years. But I thought about it as my kids challenged me, Dad, once a month. I mean, what if you were to have conversation with Mom once a month? How satisfied would you be? And it was just an aha moment that came from just such from young children, right? We can learn so much from our children. So don't be afraid to get your children involved at a very early age. They're capable. They're capable. But the two things that you don't have them involved is the vision statement, ideally, the parents, the mission statement, the goals, but they can be involved in this process and help you go through it, if age appropriate, of course, right? So I'm setting it up. I want to get your kids involved in this process. Don't just slap this plan on them and say, hey, I got a new plan. We're going to do that. The buy-in is much greater with higher participation. Mm-hmm. And of course, it's age appropriate, and you know your children better than anyone else, right? And then I write out what covenants, what promises, what commitments are you willing to make? One of those commitments we made is that before any of my children were married, that we would meet them and they would participate on our biweekly devotional calls for at least 6 months. And they committed to that. They also committed to meet a Christmas dinner every year at our home. And then 2 days later, I would typically we would recap the year, and we would launch the following year's process. And so we've been doing that for 20 years. So I'll tell a story. If you don't have a story, you just tell your story. But those are some covenants that we've made, and we're living out for 20 plus years now. And now I get a chance to experience those same covenant commitments and promises with the extended family, with my son-in-law and daughter-in-law and so forth. And now even my grandchildren, one of my grandchildren has joined my call. because he's age appropriate now.
Mhm.
And so, you know, I started to have fun with that and the covenant and how it led towards change and so forth. And then I leave with some key thoughts. You know, on page 37, a covenant is covenant is a framework of responsibility and benefits. So I go through, I'll wrap it up. Remember, I wrap up often with key thoughts.
Mhm.
Okay. And then I go into some final thoughts. Guys, we've been talking a lot. There's a lot here. We've probably exercised our brain well beyond capacity. I'll have some fun. I'll say some, but there was a final thought that I'm reminded of from a good friend of mine by the name of Jim Moy. And Jim Moy has been a prayer coach for me for probably well over 15 years. And at the end of any call or session I have with Jim, or any meeting I have with Jim, who also served on different boards that I served on, he used to always say, Terrence, I want you to have a strong love for Jesus. Strong love for Jesus. And I realized, what the Lord is saying. He says, some will confess the name of Jesus, but others will mature in their relationship with Christ. And we are to bring up a generation, train and instruct them in the Lord, that they would do exactly what Jim charged me to do every time we prayed together, spent time together, that they would have a strong love for Jesus. So basically, you close it with this powerful, inspirational something.
Right.
Then I say, but I want you to be careful, because you're going to leave here and life is going to get in the way. Life is going to get busy. And in fact, the Bible warns us against 3, what I call winds of distraction and winds of evil. 1, we've got to protect ourselves against the world, the evil one, and ourselves. The world is going to have a different view of what we're presenting here today. The world is going to challenge everything that your values and your beliefs and your vision and everything that we talked about. The evil one, he's going to try to distract you. He's going to try to say, hey, does that really make sense? I mean, why are you writing this out anyway? He's going to try to reduce everything that you've done and everything you will do in the near future. And then you're going to be, hey, life gets in the way. You're busy. You have children, whatever. And all of a sudden you're going to say, man, I'll get to that later. This isn't important. I mean, man, why do I have to write it down anyway? We're kind of doing this anyway. And why is that important? So I'll set up, let's just be aware of these winds that blow and that can take us in a direction opposite of what we're trying to accomplish here. And then I'll give them a conclusion on page 39. Where will your spiritual journey take you from here? And I try to encourage them. I try to let them know that their destination is non-negotiable, whatever you want to do to encourage them. Then I asked them at the end, if you look back 20 years from today, if your parents would have had a spiritual plan for your life, what might be different? But also as you look forward and you look at your children's life or your grandchildren's life 20 years from now, what would you desire to be different? Remember your vision statement. Remember the destiny. Remember the horizon. Whatever way you want to close it. And then
I
I'll
like
leave them.
that. I like that. I wish I had that in writing somewhere.
Well, you got it out, right?
Do I? Where is that? It's not in here.
Yeah. Well, you're going to get this video.
Okay.
And then whatever way you want to, set it up, it's up to you. And then I'll say, but you're not alone. And so we have a coaching process. And so what we like for you to do is into multiple stages. And so the first stage is kind of weird. I do a weird exercise. I said, write your name and your phone number on a piece of paper. And y'all write it down. I said, I want you to ball it up. Okay. And I want you to look across the room, stand up, ball up this piece, and I want you to throw it at somebody across the room. And so imagine all this papers flying. I mean, and I say, we have a sophisticated follow-up coaching process, blah, blah, blah. And now I got people writing their names, balling up a piece of paper and throwing it across the room. Okay? People are like, what the heck's going on? And I have everyone make sure you have a piece of paper from someone else. It's not your own. And I say, here's what I'd like for you to do. In 15 days, I want you to look at that, call that person whose paper you received. And I want you to ask them one question and one question only. And then I want you to hang up the phone. And the question is, have you started writing your spiritual plan for your family spiritual plan? Yes or no? Don't listen to, well, but no, it's yes or no. Have you started writing your plan? 15 days, you're going to call. You're the accountability partner. And if they say yes, you say, thank you so much for sharing, and you hang up the phone. Click. If they say no, all you say is, thank you for sharing. Please get started, and hang up the phone. Click. 15 days, you're going to make that call. Write it down on your calendar to be the person's accountability partner 15 days from now. 30 days from now, if you like, we're going to send a reminder and we can come back and we can do either virtual or in class, depends on where you are. If it's your church or whatever, we'll do a 30-day follow-up session. And in that 30-day follow-up session, now we'll do Zoom or whatever. We'll talk about, hey, what progress are you making? What challenges do you have in any areas? We'll address those with you. For example, they may need a little help finishing up their vision statement. They may need a little help in whatever it is, right? Now, this is your opportunity to say, guys, you've got a good start. I love where you're going. I want to make you aware of some additional coaching that we have. We have a 3-month coaching process. We have a 1-year, 2-year, and 3-year coaching process. And I would love for you to continue this process with me as a master family champion coach. And I can help you walk through this process over the next 3 months, 1 year, 2 year, 3 years. Here's how it works. I'll be conducting a Zoom call. Other people will be on this call. We'll be talking about specifically certain components of the planning process. I'll be going more into this process, and we'll be coaching you through the year of commitment, year 1. We'll be coaching you through what that looks like and activities that you can be involved in, resources about whatever. And then for those who sign up for 2 years, you'll be committed through the year of connection and commitment. And year 3, if you sign for 3 years, it'll be connection. So now we can walk through the entire process together. I'll be your coach. I'm here to serve you. I'm here to be your guide. And that's when you get signups for coaching. Okay. But you also emphasize that at training, and now you're re-emphasizing that at the 30-day follow-up. Go ahead.
So are there slides for this, or we don't do this yet, or is there a handout?
Well, we do this slide, and then I think I have a slide right here. Reserve your coaching discipline plan, sign up now, personalized coach. And then we have a way for them to sign up and so forth and so on.
Do you have like what you showed us on your own PowerPoint, what the 3-month, 1-year, and 3-year plan looks like?
Yeah, I can put those in a slide. And this one, I didn't put it here, but we can put that on a slide if you want to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think they'd want to see what they're signing up for.
Yeah. And so we can do that, and I just kind of talk through it here, and I kind of show them and different things. But yeah, we can do that.
And so, do you cover that part, since you know what you have more of an idea what that entails?
For this session, I can cover it. But for the next session, you'll cover it.
I mean, I remember you going over all of that.
Yeah.
But I don't have any of that.
Yeah, no problem. I can have it. And also I'll send you a video. There's a video on YouTube for you as a Mass Family Champion to review that. Okay. So I'll send you a link to that video as well. It's all in there, the one that I walk you through.
Okay. So there's a lot of moving pieces to all of this.
Yeah. It's a lot. It's
It's
a
a little,
lot of pieces for you to learn, a lot of tools, a lot
yeah,
of resources.
yeah,
And I don't want to throw a lot of them at you because you have more resources and tools than you could ever imagine. If I gave you
right.
all of them, you'll sit there, especially you, and you will try to go through all this stuff, and you don't need to
Yeah,
go through it until it's ready.
I know,
So
I know.
just trust me. I've been doing
I do.
this,
I
and
do. I know how my mind works. Like
I
it's
know how
not
your mind works, and
it's
that's why
not
I'm
it's
not
not
giving
the
it to you.
amount it's not the amount of material that's overwhelming. It's the fact that it's not streamlined
Yeah,
that's
well,
overwhelming.
when you get it, when I show up, you'll have everything in a package.
When
And
we show up, that I'll
no, I'm
be like,
saying when I'm saying doing certain pieces, like
okay.
like today, I'm going to send you an email with like everything I just talked about, right? But
Uh-huh.
if I had you go through it individually, you'll be more confused than ever. But this is how simple this process is. You're walking
Uh-huh.
through. Just right now, I want you to focus on just learning uh, how to use a PowerPoint, how to use a participant guide together. What
Right.
stories might you tell? I don't want you to worry about anything else right now,
Right, right.
right?
Okay.
Because you're not coaching anybody right now. If I gave you all these pieces, like the year of, if I give you the agenda for the year of contentment, you know what I mean, commitment, connection, you know what you're going to do? You're going to be going through it. And I don't
Right,
want you going through it because you don't know enough to go through it right now. So
right,
remember, we're not done today or next month.
right,
We're going to be talking on every month about this stuff.
right.
And we're going
Okay.
to be reinforcing with you every month.
Right,
And so if I try to give you this much in 1, 2, 3
right,
setting, you go crazy
right.
because you
So
can't absorb it.
yeah, yeah. So you're saying I don't have to have all of this known
No, what
through
you got to
for this
learn right now.
presentation.
Well, you got to learn. Yeah. So what you want to do is go through this presentation. And then we're going to come back and say, well, I had already kind of pre-assigned you some pieces, but you want to now go back and say, Terrence, I feel real good about
Okay.
talking about this section, that section, and the other section.
So that's how we divide up how we're gonna do it.
Exactly.
Okay,
Exactly.
now I understand.
Okay.
I thought it was gonna be assigned and I'm going through like, well, which part am I doing and which part's he
No,
doing?
no, no. We're going to come
Okay,
back and you're going to look at it and we're going to say, oh, I feel good. I feel good about this. I feel good
okay,
about that.
gotcha.
And
That
then,
that
okay. And then I'm going to come back the 24th, I think it is. And then,
14.
or 14th, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
14th. And guess what's going to happen? You're going to present to me instead of me presenting to you. You're going to actually
Okay.
present those sections to me.
Okay. And that's when I tell you which ones I'm comfortable with
Well, you're going to tell me before.
before then. Okay. So
And
what
then on
would
the
that deadline
14th, you're going to deliver
be? Okay.
those sections.
So I need to let you know by when.
Today is the 24th, right?
Mm-hmm.
So within 7 days,
Okay. So by next week.
7 days, you're going to let me know which sections you're comfortable.
Okay.
And then you're going to rehearse those sections. And then on the 14th, you're going to actually deliver those. You're going to
Okay.
present them to me on a Zoom call. And so you're going to do all the talking, the next section for the most part, not me.
On those sections.
On those sections, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And then when we get together in Nashville, we will already have, I will outline who does what and so forth in the sheet that I'm going to send you.
Okay.
And you'll know how it's going to flow. But at the same time, you'll be able to see it. You would have heard it. You would have seen it a couple of times. You would have delivered it. So the way I'm teaching is this. The first step is we're just telling you how to do it.
Right. Okay.
The second step, we're showing you how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
The third step is we're letting you do it.
Mm-hmm.
And the fourth step is that we will coach you as to how to do it.
Okay.
And then we'll repeat that process over and over and over until you get it, until you feel comfortable.
Okay.
Okay.
And then that's when you start doing them on your own.
Exactly.
Okay. Gotcha.
Exactly. And my plan is when I'm finished with you, believe it or not, you trust me on this. Just like Renee. and you're way beyond what Renee. But Renee's a school teacher. Okay. She's a school teacher.
Yeah.
But she was just nervous about being in front of people.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no,
Okay.
I'm not worried about that.
Yeah. So I don't want you to walk away thinking, remember what Renee said to you.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to be perfect. I wanted to have everything down. Please don't go there. I don't want you to be a robot. I want you to be
Right.
personal. I want you to connect with people. I
Right.
want you to tell your story, not my story. Now, you're going to tell my story in the sense of a founder, and here's the foundation, here's the basic and all that. But I want when this thing is going to come alive as you tell your story. And your story may be, look, I don't have kids.
Right.
You know, why would I even want to do it? I mean, you're going to have to come up with that whole thing, right?
Yeah.
Why would I want to do this? How can I even become a coach? And I don't even have children. Da, 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 da.
Right.
So your story can't be my story. My story can't be your story.
Exactly. Yeah. I
Right?
think just some feedback. It would have been very helpful and calming for me if I had known beforehand, like how we were going to divide up the sections. Because I knew you said we were going to. I just didn't know what that was going to look like
Yeah,
until
I don't
now.
want you worried about that until you need to worry about it. Because I know it's
But I was
too,
worried about it.
I know.
until you said that.
I know. But because if I do that, you're going to be so thinking about that. And I don't want you thinking about that. I want you learning. The other thing that would be helpful is keep reading the book.
Yeah.
Everything that I'm going over in these sections,
Mm-hmm.
more stories, more illustrations, more things.
Mm-hmm.
Use this book as a resource.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So you have your leader's guide, just kind of point you in some directions. You have your participant guide to point you in some directions. You have the book. You have our devotional guide. You have a prayer guide. You have all those to start to listen. You have our YouTube videos to listen to. It has a coaching video on there. You've listened to already as part of your assignment. You can go back and refresh. Remember what Renee said. I went back and I watched Taryn's videos again. It meant something more to me the second time than it did the first time. So you go back, go back. Simple, repetitive, repetitive, and trust the process. Renee is ready to go after the same session I'm walking you through.
Okay.
But the only difference is she saw this live.
Right. Yeah.
We're doing it over Zoom, but you're going to see it live.
Yeah.
That's why I'm not letting you do the whole thing.
Thank you, Terrence.
I'm letting you do pieces of it. Although I know you can do it. I know if I just keep working with you, you could do it, but you've never seen it before. So I'm not going to throw you out there like that. I'll give you a few pieces that you can do well to get your confidence going. All right. So you got the assignment.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for your time and all that stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's all here, it's all there. Don't worry. I'm going to send you a whole bunch of stuff because you're a consumer. You're going to consume it all up.
Yeah.
And just trust the process.
I will.
I've got you. I'm not going to put you out there. Believe me, I'm not putting you out there until you're ready.
Right. Just to kind of give you an update on the logistics, I sent out invites. I just kind of wrote a little blurb myself on an email explaining what it was and linking to the website. And I've sent it to about 30 people, so I'm hoping to get 10 at least. I'll double check about the tables, make sure we've got tables. And I did tell them what we agreed on about, no charge, but if they want to give a love offering, they can. Someone actually asked me, what amount do you recommend? I said, I don't know, just, go with what the Spirit's leading you. That's all I need to tell them. But, for them to wait until the end so that after they've seen the value of it. Mm-hmm. And then, what else? Oh, I told them, we would be providing lunch, and I didn't know like what you need to know. There is a Chick-fil-A very close to where we're going to hold it. There's a couple other places close by. So
we do a box lunch, Chick-fil-A.
Okay.
Or whatever you want to do.
Is that something I need to coordinate, or is that something you coordinate? Or I coordinate that.
You're handling all the logistics and stuff.
Oh, I am. Okay, gotcha. I want to make sure.
The room, the coffee, the snack, all that's on you.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm the professor coming in and doing my picks. No, just kidding. Okay. I'm your co-presenter.
And then, so do I keep receipts for that? Is that something I pay for out of pocket, or how does that work?
No, you'll give those to me.
Okay.
And then we'll just reimburse you for those. Typically what will happen, It's the registration fees that you collect will pay for those expenses.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, but we're waiving that for this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
you just keep those, you give them to me, we'll take care of
Okay.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I told them like RSVP to me by August 4th, so they'll know.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And remember, we're going to have another session on this. We're going to keep
Yeah.
going through it. You're going to be presenting it. So that way I know you know it. And
Yeah. Yeah. And
yeah.
hopefully these people will tell their friends about it and say, hey,
Yeah.
you need to go to this.
Well, the key is the first one. Remember, this is just a one for you to kind of
Right.
do.
Yeah.
You want to keep the other ones coming. So when you do it for real, well, you're doing it for real,
Yeah.
but when you do it for
Yeah.
charge, then that's when you want a bunch of people there.
Yeah. You want them to bring people with them though.
Yes, yeah. You want them to come back and bring people. And that's
Yeah.
when you're going to have your first big event, charging and all that stuff. And we'll use, registrations and all that. And then that's when you want to have your big one,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
Okay.
So you
Great.
don't want a bunch of people in this first one because this is your practice session. I'd
Yeah.
say 10 to 12 is a good number.
That's why I've only invited 30 because I
Yeah.
know only a third will come.
Yeah.
Typically.
Yeah. I always figure 5 to 1. Every 5 I invite, I'll get one.
Yeah.
Yeah, about 20%.
Yeah. So, all right.
All right.
Good.
So
Well,
we'll
thank you
keep
for all
plugging.
your time,
Thank
Terrence.
you for Saturday.
Tell Renee
Uh,
again, thank you for her time too.
Yeah.
And her
And
encouragement.
we'll keep having people chime in and you'll hear from other Master Family champions and they'll
Okay.
share with you stuff and encourage you. And every month now, every third Thursday, we'll start to meet once you get going and reinforce these points that I'm making in certain sections. I'll
Right.
send you an email today just to kind of get you a little bit more information, what we talked about. You'll have everything.
Yeah, that
And
PowerPoint will be helpful.
and then I got to spoon feed you because I know you. and, and it's not just you, Lori, actually.
I know.
Yeah, I've done this, and you have people on one side who needs everything, and then you have people on the other side who's like, Terry, just send me just what I need.
Yeah.
And I know if I send everybody everything, they will go through that. They won't understand it. I'll have to double explain it. By the
Yeah.
time I have to unconfuse them from the confusion that they have. And so, after training probably about 15 now locally and about 50 internationally,
Right.
I've just learned I got to spoon feed and I'm going to take my time. Remember,
Right.
we're in a marathon, not a sprint.
Right. So what's the average number of practice sessions does someone need before they feel
2.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Typically, we'll do it a couple of times. And here's the beauty. I just remember one girl, we did it a couple of times. She was just afraid to, she was wonderful. She was just afraid to speak in front of people or just different things. She didn't feel like she had a story. She wasn't a mom yet. She was engaged. So she didn't have any kids, all that stuff. And so we had her do it. And she was amazing.
Oh, good.
She was a man like, Turkey, you sat here for 2-3 times talking about this. I mean, in fact, the day we were going to do it, like, Terry, I can't do it. I don't want to do it. I'm like, okay. So I'm like, I'll do it. And then you come up and tell a story that she had prepared, right? I get up there, I set her up. I tell my little story, introduce her. And she goes up and just kills it, right? I just put her on the spot. I didn't listen to her because I knew she was ready.
Yeah.
She looking at me like, you set me up. I can't believe you did.
You better not set me up, Terry.
No, I don't. I'm only going to do what I know you're capable of, right?
Yeah.
Because my job is to push you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew she could do it, right? I heard her do it like 2-3 times, right?
Right.
So she was just afraid. She gets up there and knocks it out the park. And I was like, she's like, well, I can't believe. I said, don't even say, you're getting up there the rest of the time, you're going to knock it out the park. Yeah. You know why I designed it? I'll wrap up with this. The reason I know where you are, most people are, you're like my wife.
Mm.
My wife needs every detail.
Mm.
She's not getting up there unless she knows every detail.
Yeah.
And I can just kind of get up, and I've done it so many times. I just know what to do, right? I just do it.
Right.
She can't work that way. And so
I can't either.
now she is just, she's amazing, right? Because she has it down. She's been doing it several times, right? I remember when I
Yeah.
first put her up there, she had the book, she had the training, she had all the stuff. And she was like, I got to hold on to this book so tight. I got to read this thing. Like, no, you got to tell your story. You know more about this than I do. And she just knocked out the park. And people love her. I mean, they love her way better than me. And because she's going to come from a different angle, right? And so I'm like,
Yeah.
she was the woman's side of the story. I was telling my story,
Mhm.
but then she was telling her story, and then we were talking about how they both came together. It was beautiful. And so
Right.
I just want you to know that I know where you are. Don't worry about it.
Mhm.
I'm confident. I'm like
Okay.
100% confident that when you get up there, you're gonna do your best. I'm not trying to get you to do and say what I do and say. I want you to make this your own.
Right.
But you got to stick with these key
Yeah, yeah.
thoughts and those
No, okay.
processes, right? Because
That's the part I want to make sure I know well is the
yeah,
key thoughts.
yeah,
That's what I want to make sure I'm
that's
getting
that's what I
down.
want you to
That's where I'm.
land and make sure the stories you tell and all that stuff. I really, as long as they connect, I don't really care. But those key thoughts and processes and so forth, you cannot deviate from. That's how we make
Right.
McDonald's
Right.
fries. They're consistent,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah. That's where I'm a little nervous. Like I want to get that down. So.
Yeah, yeah. Just study those sections and key thoughts and the stories. Pray us out,
Okay.
and I will send you
Okay.
that. Then we'll reconvene. Okay.
All right. Lord, thank you so much for Terrence's heart for family and for spiritual legacy. And thank you for giving him this vision and equipping him to equip others. We just pray for our time on August 21st. We pray that we get the turnout that we hope for, that you hand select each person that you know needs to be there that day. And thank you so much for Terrence's training and his encouragement, and pray for him throughout the weeks, and as he grows this ministry. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Last thing I would say to you, be thinking about if when I'm up that day, if you want to optimize my time, if you want me to meet someone, I want to meet a
Okay.
pastors or whatever, we want to get the movement going in Nashville so we can start
Right.
lining up workshops for you. We'll be
Right.
inviting people in Nashville as well, just to kind of hear kind of vision sessions. So I'm going to be connecting with people when I'm up there.
Okay.
So I'm going to
Good.
come up a couple of days before.
Okay.
So just know if you want me to meet someone or just connect
Okay.
with someone, I'll have some time to do that either, before. I'm going to come up, and then my job is to try to see if we can get you a couple of workshops going.
Mm-hmm.
If you know somebody that might benefit from that, get them in front of me. Let's have dinner,
Okay.
whatever,
Right.
and let's get you booked up in Nashville.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. Thank you
Take
so
care.
much.
All righty.
You
You did
too.
great.
Have a good
Have a good
one.
one. Bye bye.
Thanks. Bye.